Welcome, great entertainers, to Geek Salad's Retro Movie Reviews from the Geek Salad Podcast. I'm Andy.
I'm Mike.
And we have a very special guest to join us on our Let's Talk About the Oscars Through the Decades. Mike's gal, Jonna, welcome. Hi. It is, if you notice, it is dark where we are, but it is light where Jonna is because she's 3 hours behind us.
Well, that just means I have more time to enjoy after we finish this.
That's true. Whereas I will probably watch an episode of Ted Lasso and go right to bed. So,
could do that too.
Yeah. So tonight we enter the 1970s, the definitive filmmaker's decade, to talk about. Well, first of all, a Best Picture winner we have not yet talked about. We've actually talked about several Best Picture winners in the 70s. We've done both Godfathers. We've done Rocky.
Mm-hmm.
I think that might be it. Yeah, I think that's about it. So we're going to 1973, and the winner of Best Picture for that year, The Sting.
Yeah, and I know it's one of Jonna's favorite movies, so I had to bring her in for this one.
Yes, absolutely. Now, Mike said that this is a favorite movie of your dad's, right?
No, actually, this is my mom's favorite picture of all time.
Oh, okay.
That may be due to the quality of the film. It may be the fact that it was probably the first movie she saw ever after I was born, because I would have been about 6 months old at that time.
Yeah. Okay. And I mean, it's the thing about this movie that is just like undeniable is that chemistry between an ageless Robert Redford and an ageless Paul Newman.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was bringing back the same sort of chemistry they had in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Yeah. And Mike was even saying they only did 2 movies together, and it seems like they did a lot more.
Yeah. I was trying to think. I know they did The Sting. They did Butch Cassidy. What else did they do? I know they've done more. I looked it up this time. I was like, no, they just did the 2.
Yeah.
No, what they did was they paired up for their charity fund.
Oh. Yeah.
So
for their Hole in the Wall gang.
But
and
it's
guess where that name came from?
It's I mean, this movie in and of itself is so much fun to watch because the entire plot revolves around getting you to the end of the movie to see when the long con is finally done.
You know from the title exactly what you're getting. It's going to be a sting. It's a con. But the whole thing is a romp. And because Redford and particularly Newman in this are so infinitely charming together.
Yeah.
You are along with them for the ride. And yet it's also not just the 2 of them, but it's very much an ensemble piece because 2 people couldn't pull off that con. They had to have their whole rogues gallery. And they took a good chunk of the people who, as they said, that they couldn't, after what happened to Luther, you couldn't get more than 200 or 300 guys.
And
that's another thing. The movie is infinitely quotable.
Yes.
I mean, in particular, actually, I like a lot of the side characters actually had a very nice characterizations, even the character arc, like Erie Kid. It was his first time, but as what was it, Kid Twist?
Yeah.
Said like, I think you got something. Go get an outfit.
Yep, you got Moxie, kid.
Yep.
And even right at the end, like Redford gives him a little nod. It's like, you did good.
Yeah.
And that's when you're in the audience, you're as much a part of the gang as everyone else. When they see them do the sign, they're giving you the sign too.
Yep. And it's what I find really interesting is that Robert Shaw's character, Lonergan, is such a he's just such a dangerous character. It almost feels like it could have been out of place in this movie, which, Johnny, you called it a romp, and I absolutely agree with that. It is absolutely a comedic romp. but the fact that he is such a dangerous character in this whole thing, and for the most part, especially watching Newman in that train scene where he's pretending to be drunk, and he is essentially Bugs Bunny to Lonergan's Elmer Fudd during that card game.
He's trying to make him so mad that he can't see straight.
Yeah.
Because you've got to get him wanting to take their money first in the card game and then in the betting sequence.
Yeah. I would say almost more Yosemite Sam-ish than Elmer Fudd-ish, though.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. And
yeah, but I mean, yeah, I like the fact that Robert Shaw kept the tension, like, overall, I mean, you kind of knew where the movie was going, and the music kept things playful. But whenever Shaw was on screen, there was still that sense of dread. Like, is this guy going to figure this out and kill them both right now?
Right. Considering he's committed murder several times in this movie. I mean, completely off screen, but
of his own people and others.
Yeah, and the guy who Luther and Redford's character con at the very beginning of the movie. They say they found him in a garbage heap
with a knife in his eye.
Yeah. So it does do, no, Mike, you had mentioned the music, and one thing I like about this movie was that the way it's presented is almost like a 3-act play. The fact that there are these breaks and these chapter titles, and then you get a little bit more of that ragtime music, which at first, Marvin Hamlish was like loath to play somebody else's music. But funny enough, The Great Entertainer actually became a top 10 radio hit.
Yeah.
Because of its inclusion in the movie and because it's so jaunty that, I mean, for the most part, you think that he wrote it.
Yeah, it really kind of researched the love for The Entertainer and was it Joplin? I think
it's Scott Joplin.
Joplin's music in general.
Yeah, it just brought him back into the zeitgeist, as it
were.
were.
And also, it's just indelibly tied to the movie. When you hear, the Great Entertainer, you think the Sting, which is just, it's great synergy how that worked.
Although I will say though, if I had one knock against this movie, it is that score. It just feels so like, there'll be like 30 minutes of nothing, and then suddenly a foot chasing here. And like, this does not fit this scene at all. I mean, it works for the movie in this weird way, but it every time that like kind of playful piano is like, it just kind of pushes me out of the movie.
I don't know. I feel like there were occasions where George Roy Hill, the director, was trying to almost give it a Keystone Cops kind of feel in certain aspects, and the inclusion of that music, I think, worked. It's interesting because we were so used to dealing with grandiose scores when we think about Best Picture winners, and this thing is just, it's a couple of rehashed songs.
Well, we hadn't gotten to the 80s where they dialed the drama up to 11 on every Oscar movie.
The true age of the superstar movie composer.
Yeah, it wouldn't happen for another 4 years.
That's true. Now, what about?
Well, technically 2 years.
2 years, yeah, with Jaws.
Yeah.
But what about that opening credit sequence? Was that like, before its time, the most unique movie opening credit sequence you've seen? It almost played like a sitcom in terms of how they have the painting, they have the title, and then you see the characters. Like, you see like clips of the movie with Robert Redford and Paul Newman and Ray Walston and all these characters, which is something I don't think I have ever seen in a movie before or since.
No.
Well, the screen cards were I think very much a nod to what would have been the cinema of the time. This is set in the 30s.
Yeah.
So you still would have had a certain amount of silent movie stuff floating around. The talkies would have been just, being
Yeah.
a thing too. And so they go very much back to that sort of feel and giving you a sense of the setting. And then the little clips give you an idea of who you're going to see. I mean, you see Redford, and you'll later find out he's still in his really low life con man
Yeah.
suit, where he's going to blow his money on one spin, but he's flashing that grin, that charmer's grin.
Yeah.
And you see there's something infectious there. It's drawing you in.
You're right. This is oddly Robert Redford's only nomination for Best Actor.
Really?
He has never been nominated for Best Actor before or since.
I mean, he's won like I know he won Best Director for.
He won Best Director. I think he also produced Ordinary People, but he directed Ordinary People, and that's. I hate to use that term for actors who direct, but he kind of backdoored his way into an Oscar that way. It's kind of like when like famous actors win Oscars because they produced a movie.
Maybe he was running afoul of the same thing that you see with women, beautiful women in Hollywood. They're not exactly taken seriously. So the ones who go, they, ugly themselves up and go into some gritty drama and make themselves less attractive so people can focus on the film maybe instead of their face.
Right, like Charlize Theron in Monster.
And Redford at that point, I'm sorry, he was just ridiculously good looking.
Yeah,
exactly. And
he doesn't age. To this day, he still doesn't age.
Yeah.
So, maybe he was running afoul of that early on.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's also funny too to think that Paul Newman did not get a nomination for this because I think his part is equally as great. In fact, I might like him better in this than.
Oh, I definitely do because Hooker, Redford's character, he's a hothead. He's young. He's impetuous. Anybody who even now. You blow $1,500 on a single spin of the roulette wheel, and most of us would be having a heart attack.
Yeah.
But imagine that in the Depression era 30s, and
that's a lot of money.
He needs to slow down, learn, and Paul Newman's Gondorf tells him exactly that. And reams him out on a couple of occasions. I'm teaching you stuff that only a couple, 3-4 guys in the world know, and you want to blow it.
Yeah.
I would say the only kind of thing that might hold Newman back is that once like they kind of really start the sting and it kind of goes into like Hooker and
Lonergan. Yeah.
Newman's character really kind of takes almost a backseat. You really only see him when they actually go into the office and are pulling this thing off. And there's been a few conversations between Hooker and Gondorf.
Yeah.
He really kind of lets Hooker be like the point man, the runner, and doing all the things while he stays in the office.
Right. The story is kind of told through Hooker's eyes.
Yeah.
In that case.
And I mean, Hooker is kind of the catalyst of this whole thing. I mean, it's basically a revenge story. He wants revenge on Lonergan for Luther's death, and I like the fact that he says, I'm I'm not a murderer, or else he'd be
I don't
dead.
know enough about killing to kill him.
Yeah.
Jonna's seen this movie many more times than Mike or I.
Oh, yeah. In fact, the first time I ever saw it was with her. She showed it to me.
Nice. This movie, it is a blessing. This movie is on Netflix though, because it's really, it's easy to just sit and get lost in it. And it's not a particularly long movie either in the eyes of Best Picture winners. I think it's like a tidy 2 hours long.
Yeah,
No,
little
and
over two.
it keeps you drawn in because they keep throwing in twists like the problem where they can't pay off, where all of a sudden Lonigan decides that he wants to try it again, and
Yeah,
they don't have the money to pull it off, so uh, they
They have
have
to
to
shut it down.
adapt and change their plan on the fly. And that personally is one of my favorite scenes, where they go into the wire office and pretend to start painting while that
yeah,
poor man is out to lunch.
yeah.
And then let's take it out of here, and they get Lonigan out of there, and the poor man whose office it is comes back, and he's got like stripes of paint on his wall,
Right,
but he has no
exactly.
idea how they got there.
I just love the fact, like, Walston, after they've already gotten the guy out, Walston's just like casually just getting all the stuff, putting it back on again, and just walking right out the door right
Yep.
second before the manager comes in.
That's great. I have to say too, this is the second movie in a row that we've reviewed with Ray Walston as a supporting character in it. This movie utilizes his voice so well because of just the way he calls these races as part of a part of this con, and he does such a good job with it. I kind of feel like he's always been underappreciated in terms of that ability to talk that we really only see in this. We see it in Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
It would have been very easy for a lot of the secondary characters to blend into the background, but they really don't. As Mike observed, they really give them some character traits, some character development. And so when the movie's over, you still have a picture of a lot of these background characters. Kid Twist, the Erie Kid, JJ.
Yeah.
They and even if you can't come up with the name of them, you still think of the banker guy who is when he sees the sign, he is putting his closed sign up and taking
Yep.
off because he knows there's a job.
Even Eileen Brennan is Billy.
Yeah.
I love Eileen Brennan as Billy. In a movie where there are very, very few women,
I counted 5.
she's the only one who has any real screen time.
Yeah.
And it would be easy for her to get overlooked in this. Certainly doesn't match meet the Bechdel test, right?
Right.
But she is a strong character. For one thing, the initial start of the sting wouldn't have worked if she hadn't taken the risk and pickpocketed Lonigan.
Right.
Which gave them the operating capital for the poker game. And then she's not at all afraid of Snyder, this cop who has walked into her. She's a madam. She's running a house of ill repute under the carousel. She gets a few very quotable lines herself with her, "That's a Joliet badge, doesn't cut much up here." And then when Snyder is going to go roust her customers looking for her, and she tells him, "I wouldn't do that." He says, "What are you going to do, call a cop?" And she tells him, "Don't have to. You'll be busting in on the chief of police down the hall." And she's just cool as a cucumber the entire time.
Yeah, this is great. I think this might be her first big role. I mean, she would go on to do other things, and all us Gen Xers know her as Miss Peacock in Clue. But so let's take a moment to actually look at what it beat for. Yes, Mike.
I think it's also really kind of an advanced, advanced for 1973 movie where, he doesn't have a large role, but Robert Earl Jones, James Earl Jones' father, playing Luther, and he's a small part, but it's a very important part because you can see how respected his character was by everybody. Like everybody's like, dude, we're in on this. We don't care who.
Everyone's doing it. Everyone's doing it for Luther.
Yeah.
And in a movie where everyone, including the cops, are criminals, they draw a very bright line between the good guys and the bad guys. And Lonigan everybody else is a thief. Thieves are what they are.
Yeah.
Lonergan's a killer and a
Yeah.
cold-blooded one. And so you know immediately who you're rooting for in that exchange.
Exactly. It's like Ocean's 11. You know, you're rooting for the thieves because they've made the person they're stealing from that much more despicable.
And
Yeah,
what's remarkable is that for as short a time as Luther is in the film, you feel his loss.
Yeah.
When he dies, you feel for his wife. Because the whole picture doesn't work if you don't have a feeling of loss for this character whose only mistake was that they stumbled on the wrong mark.
Right.
And also, you have to buy the friendship between him and Luther, and him and Hooker and Luther's family, because if he doesn't have a friendship with Luther's wife, then the whole FBI con doesn't
work weight at all. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Oh yeah, she treats Hooker like he's her wayward son, just razzing him and giving him a hard time because she knows he's going to go out and spend his money that night.
Right. And I can't imagine being an audience member, sitting and seeing The Sting for the very first time. And, you know, you might be following along with certain parts. You know the whole thing's a con. But the fact that the FBI plays into that is such a... I couldn't imagine just the shock and awe of being in a theater in 1973 watching that and going like, oh.
Played by Dana Elcar.
So it wouldn't have happened, so.
Played by Dana Elcar, who I love from MacGyver fame.
Oh yeah, I mean that last bit is the twist. You got to take his con so he doesn't know you've taken him.
Yep. You know, the funny thing is too about Robert Shaw in this movie. I was like, I'm watching this and I know he's Irish, but I also feel like he was faking an Irish accent.
He's just so used to him doing that kind of weird.
The Quint. I'm used to him doing Quint. So when I hear him doing, you know, all this, all right, get in the car, type of Irish brogue. It's interesting. Interesting note also, that limp was real. He had injured himself prior to performing and worked that into his performance. He had like a knee brace on, and it caused him to walk with a pronounced limp.
That's
so
still to date, yeah.
Yeah. So that really worked too, because if you think about Lonergan being such, you know, a bad dude, and that something may have happened where he got stabbed in the leg or shot in the leg or something like that, and that's why he walks like that now.
Before he got out of 5 points, right?
Yeah. So let's take... Yep. Sorry, Mike.
I will also say, though, besides just like being, you know, progressive with the black characters, very few female characters, but the huge twist about who is the most feared and deadly killer in Lonergan's arsenal.
Celino.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
because you never see Celino. When Celino is referenced, it's always by the surname.
Yep.
And even at the beginning, Celino is established as someone who is tougher than nails, because Lonergan, when his Toady is telling him he's not going to, that the one killer isn't going to come in to get thrown off the job, Lonergan warns him he's breaking the rules and Celino won't like it. Yeah. And Celino really did not like it.
Nope.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, obviously, this is a very respected and feared character. And
the reveal was great. Yeah. The reveal was fantastic with that.
Yeah.
So awesome.
Yeah, there were little twists. The first time you watch it, it's a great surprise. Unlike the usual suspects, where all the surprises hit you at once at the end.
Right.
Kind of peppered through the Sting.
But it also, I think it adds to its rewatchability too, that you might have missed something. If you don't understand why something panned out the way it did, just gotta go back and rewatch it, which was probably a lot better in 1973 when you actually have to pay movie money to go back and see it again, as opposed to like, rewind.
Well, it's not like for most people, I think it would have been a hardship to go see uh, Newman and Redford romping on the screen,
Yeah.
but I'd love to mention one of my other favorite characters. You see him on and off again, but Charles Durning
Oh
as
yes.
Lieutenant Snyder.
Yeah, you had showed me this movie, but I hadn't really seen it since, and I had forgotten how big of a role Charles Durning actually had in this movie.
Exactly. I always think of Charles Durning as being a 1980s actor because he had that like amazing string of successful movies between like 1982 and 1985.
Well, even
And obviously
78,
continuing to work up until his death. But
even 78, where he was the villain in the Muppet movie.
that's right. Oh, good Lord. Yeah. But he was
and the governor in Best Little Whorehouse in Texas.
Yeah, which he was nominated for an Oscar for. He was nominated
which is probably my quintessential Charles Durning role. When I think about him, I think about him dancing a little sidestep.
And then the very next year, he was nominated in Mel Brooks's To Be or Not to Be.
But what's interesting is he gets conned multiple times in the film. First by Hooker for the money, and then he gets drawn in unwittingly into the con itself.
Yeah.
So that at the end, he's the one who helps flip it on Lonergan.
And I like the fact that he is a persistent threat until he gets kind of roped into the FBI.
Yeah.
Sting.
They've definitely like neutered him in terms of what he can do because he thinks he's working with the FBI.
Right.
And because they know how crooked he is.
And he has no respect for the FBI because the first thing he does is start taking pot shots at them about their lovely establishment.
Yeah.
But, he gets promptly put in his place.
Yeah, Dana Elkhart can do that to you.
All right.
It won a smash of awards too.
Oh yeah. Let's go over those, shall we? Because it won a ton of Oscars. So obviously we're talking about it because it won Best Picture. Julia Phillips, by the way, who is one of the producers of this movie, is the first woman to ever win an Oscar for producing a Best Picture winner.
Wow. Nice.
Yep. It was up against American Graffiti, Cries and Whispers, The Exorcist, and A Touch of Class. Two of those movies are 70s stalwarts.
I have to say, I'm amazed. It impresses me all the more that the Academy even considered The Exorcist at that point for Best Picture. You would not see that now.
No, you wouldn't. The Sting got 10 nominations, and it tied with The Exorcist.
And it won 7, I believe.
Yes.
Yes, it did. So here are the other things that it won and were nominated for. As soon as my thing just skipped over, so I got Best Director, George Roy Hill won Best Director. He beat out. Oh, come on! It keeps doing this. Sorry.
Ironically, he was also director of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Yeah.
So him, Newman, and Redford, that was gold right there.
Yeah.
He knew what to do with them.
Mm-hmm.
So George Roy Hill beat George Lucas for American Graffiti, Ingmar Bergman for Cries and Whispers, William Friedkin for The Exorcist, and Bernardo Bertolucci for The Last Tango in Paris.
Ooh.
Best Actor. Okay, so I mentioned that Robert Redford was nominated in The Sting. He lost to Jack Lemmon in Save the Tiger. Someone we talked about last week.
Oh, yeah. Actually, interesting enough, do you know who was originally offered the role of Hooker?
Nicholson.
Jack Nicholson? Yep.
Yes. And I cannot for the life of me imagine him in that role because Hooker is supposed to be this charismatic, likable character. And every time I see Nicholson, I want to punch him in the face.
Yep. Which is interesting because Jack Nicholson was actually nominated in this category for The Last Detail.
What?
Marlon Brando was also nominated for Last Tango in Paris. And Al Pacino was nominated for Serpico.
Yeah, they were. He was up against some tough, stiff competition there.
He absolutely was. He absolutely was. Other nominees. So there was nobody nominated in any of the other acting categories that year. But best story or screenplay based on factual material or material not previously published or produced. The Sting, David S. Ward beat American Graffiti, Cries and Whispers, Save the Tiger, and A Touch of Class. Finding the other things that beat it won, because it won a bunch.
Well, original score.
Yep, original scoring, original song score and an adaptation or scoring adaptation. The Sting, adapted by Marvin Hamlish. It beat out Jesus Christ Superstar, Tom Sawyer, and Tom Sawyer. Also, funny thing about Marvin Hamlish. Marvin Hamlish won for Best Original Dramatic Score for The Way We Were. So he won multiple Oscars for multiple movies that year.
And yeah, he won also Best Song for The Way We Were
song,
as well.
Yeah, for The Way We Were.
It's good to be the king.
Oh, yeah. And Mike, you had mentioned beforehand about Hamlish having written a Bond score, and nobody does it better.
Yeah,
Live and Let Die was nominated for Best Song by Paul McCartney, but
yeah, much less like I feel that the score for this one is kind of out of left field. Much like Nobody Does It Better is completely out of left field for Bond.
Right. Best costume design. Edith Head won her final Oscar for costume design. It beat out costumes. There's several here, but it also beat out the costumes for The Way We Were, which, by the way, also starred Robert Redford. Art direction. It won art direction. It won best film editing.
It was nominated for best cinematography, but lost.
Yeah.
To Cries and Whispers.
Okay. Bergman. So,
what's interesting with Edith Head is it would have been easy to make the costumes. It was the Depression. People were wearing their hand-me-downs. And the whole movie was deliberately done in kind of a muted palette to give a feeling of the poverty of the times, or should I say the extremes of poverty and wealth at the time. And she really incorporated that in the clothing that she put them in.
Yeah, I think she did an excellent job. And the beauty was, too, it's not as garish as, like, it could have been. I mean, heck, they could have gone with zoot suits for all we know. But, Edith Head was a master at this.
Well, you saw that a lot, I think, in Billy's wardrobe. I mean, she's a madam, but she's not a madam in the manner of Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, where it's all spangles and flash. She's just wearing something soft and draping and silky, and very feminine.
Yeah.
But it's clearly much more luxurious than what you would see the average person wearing, like if they're working at that diner.
Yeah. I really wanted a plate of like diner meatloaf after that, though.
Yeah, the special did not look good.
Oh, the blue plate special. Yeah, usually that's what we refer to as like the garbage plate.
Yeah, well, she warned him. It's not any better.
Yeah, I do love the response about the meatloaf. Yeah, it's not any better.
So anything else we want to say about the Sting before we kind of wrap up? Because it's the Oscars are this coming weekend, so I don't know if you all have anything else to say about the Sting before we kind of like.
Well, shortly before it was announced as Best Picture, there was a classic moment in Academy Awards history.
Yep.
When a streaker raced across the stage.
Yep. And poor David Niven had to like try to compose himself and then come up with something witty to say.
I mean, to be fair, if he wanted to go with, a Sting appropriate outfit, he could have at least worn little nips.
Oh, the little pasties?
A barrel.
Yeah.
It was the Depression. You
It
needed
was
the
the
barrel.
Depression. A barrel would have worked perfectly well. So yeah, no, I think that I think this movie also, it's when smack dab in between the two Godfather films it feels right. It feels like it was a natural progression, especially also looking at those other nominees. It felt like it fit because of these wild set pieces and wild period pieces that are the two Godfather films. To be able to go back to a time almost before the actions of the first Godfather but still have a lighter tone and not be so heavy before we got into Godfather Part 2 territory.
I mean,
Well, I think
that's the thing
it's
about
interesting.
the thing about the Godfather movies is that they are very dense, very heavy, very depressing movies. Honestly, at the end, they are about a killer gaining power.
Yeah,
And this is about these two like kind of schlubs taking power away from a killer.
yeah.
Well, as I said, it was a romp, and even when you have watched it before, you know what's going to happen. You still get invested in watching it all spiel out.
Yeah.
Because it's fun to see somebody get their comeuppance. And in this case, it's ostensibly the law and the killer who get theirs, and everybody else is like gets away scot-free. I would say that one of my favorite lines in the whole thing has to be when they're setting up their horse betting parlor, and Benny Garfield, he's the black guy who's giving them all the goods. And so Kid Twist asks him, so how do you want to work this, flat rate or percentage?
Oh yeah.
And he asks him, who's the mark? And they tell him right off the bat, Doyle Lonnegan, his dead flat delivery of flat rate tells them exactly what he thinks of their chances of pulling this off. But those are the sorts of things that make it, in my opinion, really rewatchable. You consider that this film came out in the 70s. So in 73 exactly. So speaking as someone born that year, it will be 50. And the fact that it holds up 50 years later and it's still charming. There aren't the cringy parts about how people are treated are correct to the time period.
Yeah.
Like Snyder's treatment of Billy.
Yeah.
And so it really I think has stood the test of time. And I guess the Library of Congress and the U.S. National Film Registry thought so too, because in 2005 they selected it for preservation as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant.
Yeah, it is a very well done time capsule, and something I'm really, I was really happy that we picked this for our 1970s.
Yeah.
And Mike and I have probably been along some of those streets when we took the backlot tour at Universal.
Oh yeah. That's very true. God, speaking of Universal, I love that they opened with the old 1930s Universal logo.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Just
flashback.
Like
yeah.
Globe with the
it's almost like they're the only company that can get away with that. Like they've done that a lot. Universal's had so many iterations of their logo that if they do a time period piece, they could go back and utilize one of those. Most of the other companies can't do that. I mean, you might be able to do it with some of the 1970s stuff. Like, I know Joker did it with the Warner Brothers logo. They did the old thing, which I always thought looked like two vitamins, like on their sides. But a lot of companies can't go back that far and do it. I mean, you might be able to try to do it with the Columbia logo, but
but then you just come off like
Universal has the history. It's pretty much as old as cinema itself.
Yeah.
So
Universal International.
Yep. If it's international, then why is it was universal? Why would it? What's the point of it being international?
And they have fun too. The some of the scenes, both in The Sting and in its sadly not nearly as good sequel,
At
um,
all?
were filmed on site at various amusement parks out here. At the pier at Santa Monica for The Sting, and then up at the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk for The Sting too. Which was another thing my mother loved. She took me. That was her first roller coaster she ever rode as a child, and she took me on that to share that experience with me.
Oh, that's cute. That's cute.
The Sting 2, one of the few movies to own the distinction of being 0% on Rotten Tomato.
Yeah.
Yes, it is not a good film.
No, not at all.
This movie had a budget of like 5.5 million and pulled in like 153 million in 73. Yeah. I couldn't find the budget for The Sting 2, but it had a box office of not 60 million, 6 million. And my guess is the budget was probably higher than that.
Probably. You got to pay Gleason all all that money. So
yeah, Gleason 4 years before he died too.
Yeah. So anyway, that was The Sting. Jonna, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, because I know Mike was like, Jonna loves this movie. We got to talk about it. We got to have her on. And thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. Yeah, I grew up on this film because, again, Mom's favorite. And
it's my family label. So
we're just that wee little bit Irish.
Yeah. So let's just quickly, before we wrap up here, Oscars are this coming weekend. I have been trying to get through all the nominees. I've gotten through 6 of the 10 nominees. I posted them on Twitter, my letterboxed ranking of them. I am all in for Everything Everywhere All at Once. If you haven't seen it, it's amazing. You need to watch it. All Quiet on the Western Front, absolutely. It's fantastic. It's not an upper type of movie. It's a real downer. Yeah. Banshees of Inisherin I've watched, and it made me want a lot of Guinness. It's like the way that I'm looking at what I've seen so far, it's like upper echelon stuff is Everything Everywhere and All Quiet. Just, they are amazing movies. Then there's just this huge gap of space. And then there's the Banshees of Inisherin, which is very, very talky, very, very, you really have to pay attention to it to follow it, but it's a kind of movie that just begs you to pick up your phone and start looking, because all you're doing is listening to people talk. Top Gun Maverick, which was better than the first movie, and that's only because I really hated the first movie. It's
the mind boggles, that was considered Oscar Best Picture worthy.
I think it's more due to the fact that it made a ton of money and officially revived cinema, which is a lie because Spider-Man No Way Home did that the year before. But Triangle of Sadness just came out on Hulu, and I watched that one, and it's just kind of like with Top Gun, it's kind of in this lower echelon of movies that there's some decent pieces to it, but at the end of the day, I'm like, how much longer is this movie? I did that with a lot of these movies this year. And then finally Elvis, which Austin Butler can only do so much. He's only one man, because the movie itself it's a chore to get through if you don't like Baz Luhrmann's filming style.
Which I'm not terribly fond of.
Tom Hanks was a better penguin in this movie than Colin Farrell. Oscar nominee for the Banshees of Inisherin was in The Batman. So
fair.
Yeah. So that's my thoughts. The acting categories are really tied up. There's only like one almost sure thing. Is Kike Kwan in Everything Everywhere. Short Round. Data.
And wasn't it nice to see him back again?
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't act for the longest
For
time.
almost 40 years. He backed out of so, and ironically, it was the actor who played Chunk, who's an entertainment lawyer, who got him back in the game, and I think helped the machinations of getting him this role.
Nice. Goonies never say die, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the other acting categories are really interesting because there's no sure thing for a winner at all. I and I'll be happy either way, Michelle Yeoh or Kate Blanchett. Brendan Fraser, I really want to win, but I don't know if he can overcome I'm playing a real person, Austin Butler. And I gotta say, Angela Bassett was the absolute queen in Wakanda Forever, but I don't know. That race got interesting between Kerry Condon and Jamie Lee Curtis. It could go either way.
I would just love to see Michelle Yeoh take it, just because she's had just a whole career of fantastic roles.
Yeah. And if you see this movie, it's so she has to wear so many hats in this movie, figuratively speaking, that and maybe even sometimes literally speaking, that she makes it work.
I need to see that. When our family was seeing that, I was off getting a tire fixed, so I didn't get
okay.
to see that.
It is on Showtime. If you've got Showtime, it's
I do there. Absolutely, actually.
Okay, yep, it's on Showtime. All Quiet is on Netflix. Banshees of Inisherin is on, and Elvis are both on HBO Max. Top Gun is on Paramount Plus and Epix, and or Stars. I always confuse those two. And Triangle Status is on Hulu.
I was having fun going through my TCM guide the other day to see what was coming up, and if not all, most of your movies that you've reviewed are coming up on there.
Excellent.
Bridge on the River Kwai, The Apartment.
Nice.
And It Happened One Night, which I have set to record because after hearing your review, I really want to see that one.
It's wonderful. It is absolutely wonderful.
I would say until The Sting here, that one was probably my favorite of all the movies we've watched.
Yeah. So if we continue next week, just because I feel like we're on a roll and we're just working our way into April anyway, we want to get into the 80s. I still say we got to talk about Amadeus.
Oh, yes.
One of my all-time favorite Oscar-winning movies ever.
Amadeus is fabulous.
So you've got so Mike, you've never seen it. So Jonna and I both highly give it the thumbs up on that. Get it from the library if you can't,
I mean, I drive by the library every day. I just
and something horrible happens every time.
So, anyway. So, I think that is about it, folks. Thank you so much. Jonna, thank you again for joining us. It's always great to have you on here. And I love that you love this movie because you brought a lot more than I think either Mike or I could have brought to talking about this movie. Even though we really enjoyed this movie, you clearly adored this movie, and it's great to hear that.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's, again, it's one of those things I grew up with. So I know the lines, I know the characters, and I feel it right in my heart there.
Tell your mom it gets the Geek Salad seal of approval.
I will tell her that. She'll be thrilled to hear that.
Awesome. And if you want to give us the Geek Salad seal of approval, you will hit that subscribe button and like this video and let us know what were your thoughts on this thing. Leave a polite comment below. We always love hearing these things. Also, Mike and I host a little podcast called Geek Salad. You can check that out wherever you get your podcast. You find the app. We are there. If you are on iTunes, give us a rating because it's apparently the only thing that matters. You can also follow us on the socials at Geek Salad Radio on Twitter, on Mastodon, and on Hive, and Geek Salad Podcast on Facebook. Whew. All right. So anyway, until next time, I'm Andy.
I'm Mike.
Go forth and be nerdful. And that's Jonna. Go forth and be nerdful. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.